Hey guys, welcome back to another video about obsessive-compulsive disorder and the use of mindfulness as an aid in your progress. Today I'm going to talk about exposure and response prevention. Okay, I'm going to kind of step aside from the mindfulness. I'll touch on it, how we can use it. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about exposure response prevention, which is at this current moment, August 16th, I believe, 2013, the best known treatment for obsessive-compulsive disorder. I'm going to talk about a few things that I have found that have made it easier to resist the urge to do a ritual. Okay. So exposure and response prevention, let's just talk about the nuts and bolts a little bit if you don't know, is the treatment that they use for OCD in which you expose yourself to an anxiety-provoking situation and then you resist the urge to ritualize. So in easier terms to understand, if you have a fear of contamination, if that's your OCD, an exposure might be to touch a doorknob and then make sure that you don't wash your hands. In essence, it allows the anxiety to raise to a certain point, and then it eventually kind of peaks, plateaus, and comes back down. The theory here is that we're just training our brains to become more resilient to anxiety. Okay? And that's really it. It's like bodybuilding for your brain. Each time you work out, you get a little stronger, a little bit bigger. You can imagine that happening in your brain. Each time you perform an exposure and a response prevention session, each time you go through the whole course of action, you're making that area of your brain a little bit stronger. Now, they don't know exactly what part of the brain is being affected yet. Some think it's the amygdala, some think it's the caudate nucleus. Unfortunately, we don't have that information yet. Someday we will. We'll look back and go, wow, I can't believe they used to make people do exposure response prevention when they can just go in and make a couple snips. But as of right now, this is the best known treatment. So again, in theory, it's you let your anxiety come up, try not to do anything to make it go down, and let it come back down on its own eventually. And each time you do it, the anxiety goes up a little less and less is kind of the theory. So each time you do it, it's kind of like sitting through a scary movie. The first time you see it, you might be scared out of your mind, you know. And then you see it again, and you're still scared, but not as much. You see it a third time, it starts to get a little bit boring, right? You see it a fourth time, and you're falling asleep in the thing. That's the whole idea here. And it's shown to be effective to do it this way in obsessive-compulsive disorder because doing traditional sort of anxiety treatment in which we kind of do like thought disputation and where you try to disprove your thoughts or self-talk in which you try to make it seem like not a big deal doesn't work for OCD. It doesn't work. In fact, doing things like that, thought disputation, or trying to find odds of something actually happening, well, what's the real percentage of that happening? Does nothing. As a matter of fact, it makes it worse because that acts as a ritual. Okay, anything that works as a ritual in obsessive-compulsive disorder tends to make the disorder worse. Okay? So let's get back into exposure and response prevention. And I'm going to tell you a few things that I have found to be extremely beneficial in making sure I do not ritualize. I don't do that response. Okay? So you can think about it this way. Ritual and response mean the same thing. Okay? So exposure and response prevention can also mean exposure and ritual prevention. Okay? The R can stand for both things. Okay? And they are the same thing, just two different words for the same thing. Okay. Without doing the response prevention, I believe you will never get better. This disorder will never get better. And if you do an exposure and then you do a response or you do a ritual, you're not getting any better either. That's not doing anything. So most importantly, and I would say much more important than the exposure itself, is letting go of the ritual, stopping the ritual at all costs. Okay? For me, this was very hard in the beginning. I would do the exposure, but then I would have to do the ritual. I would have to. Even if I was able to hold off for 15 or 20 minutes, eventually I just had to do it. And then as I got a little bit better, what I was doing, I was finding myself doing these mini rituals, okay? And I will say they're just as detrimental to your progress as doing a full-blown ritual, okay? Mini rituals are when you just check real quick, maybe. You just check real quick and you get some sign of comfort, of alleviation from your symptoms, and then you stop there. You go, all right, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do the rest. It's the same thing, okay? I would do mini rituals through rumination, through checking. I would visit websites and check to see and to try to get an answer, okay? All that stuff is out. Rituals have to be out if you want to get better, okay? So let me get into it. How did I get to a point where I completely gave up the rituals? Well, this is where the mindfulness helped me a lot, okay? Whether it just gave me enough of sort of a boost in whatever's happening when you meditate in your brain, that's creating more resilience, more gray matter, they say, in the areas associated with anxiety. I may have gotten, in theory, this is my theory at least, I may have gotten strong enough mentally that I could resist the ritual a little bit better. And each time I resisted it a little bit better, and each time I practiced the mindfulness, it seemed to get easier and easier and easier. Okay? I'm not going to lie and say that I never feel the urge to do a ritual anymore. But I'll tell you the truth and say, compared to when it was maybe at like 80% out of 100, that feeling that I wanted to do it, now it's at about 5% out of 100. I mean that. So there's a few things. I used to keep a little checklist on like a 3x5 note card with just some points on it, okay? And I had a title on it that said, "Why not to ritualize?" And I had a few bullet points. Okay, the first one was the most obvious, and one that you ought to remind yourself of frequently, was this: every time you ritualize, you're going to make your condition worse. Okay? Whether you believe that right now or not, I don't care. I was writing this to myself. I'm not saying it to you, even though I do feel this way. Whether you believe this or not, I don't care. You know deep down it's going to make it worse. Okay? This is where you kind of got to be your own therapist. Okay? And a helpful little technique was called the empty chair technique that I learned at one point, where I'd imagine talking to myself in a different chair. And I'd pretend I was the therapist, okay? And the imaginary me sitting in the chair was poor little old me with the OCD. And I'd say, it puts you in a better position to think clearly. You kind of detach yourself emotionally from the situation. And I would look at that empty chair and I'd say, you know it's going to make you worse if you do it. So you're not going to do it. You're just going to choose not to do it. As hard as it is, I know that you can choose not to do it. I'm sure of it. So point number one, don't do it because you know it's going to make you worse. You know it. Be a grown-up about it. Be an adult about it. And choose instead to let the feelings of anxiety be there. Okay? So bullet point number one, I'm not going to do it because it's going to make me worse. Okay? Point number two would be, by avoiding the ritualizing, it's going to make me better. It's just going to make me better. Okay? These are two pretty darn good reasons so far not to do a ritual. Am I right? Point number one, if you do it, it's going to make you worse. If you don't do it, it's going to make you better. Okay? Point number three, and this is where the mindfulness again comes into play. Once I learned a little bit about mindfulness, I was able to apply this a lot more, and I still apply it very much today. Point number 3 is look forward to these feelings of discomfort, these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of shame, these feelings of guilt, even these feelings of depression. Look forward to them, because you have learned at this point that by applying mindfulness to them, it makes them much better, much more quickly than just doing the exposure and then letting it kind of whittle down on its own. By sitting with these feelings, you're training yourself on a whole different level. Okay, you're training yourself to accept these feelings, to not judge these feelings, to be patient with these feelings, to just allow them to be there. Okay, so 3 points so far. 1, don't do it, because if you do it, you're going to get worse. If you don't do the ritual, you're going to get better. Point number 2. 3, allow it to be there, because the more you allow it to be there and work with it and sit with it, the better your results are going to be. Okay? For me, those are the 3 big ones. Okay, there were all kinds of other little points I would put in there to try to make it easier. And I'll give you some of these too. These are kind of just little mental cues that helped me to kind of just get back to center. Okay? There was a meditation I learned called something along the lines of, is everything okay right now meditation, in which the whole theory was, even if you're feeling a little bit of distress, a little bit of anxiety, in the overall scheme of things, in the overall scheme of your life right now, are things basically okay? And am I okay meditation? Okay, so I'd make that a little bullet point. Do I really need to ritualize right now, or am I basically okay? Even if I feel a little discomfort, can I be here with it? Can I accept it the way it is? Okay, and that was very helpful too. Another helpful thing for me would be a reminder of sort of the positive things that I have in my life. Okay, again, this isn't intended to be a treatment for OCD. This is just something to kind of bring you back to saying, okay, I don't need to ritualize. So I'd have a little bullet point of people's names, people in my family that I loved and loved me back, friends of mine, skills that I have, and I'd write in, you know, a lucid sentence, something along the lines of, how good, how fortunate am I that I have so and so and so in my life, and that I have these skills, and am I going to be a big baby about this and just continue to dwell on this one little thing that I have an uncertainty about? I don't even know if it's true or not. I just don't know. I can't know, and I can't have an answer. Am I going to let that ruin my day? Really? Sometimes that would be helpful. Sometimes it wouldn't be. But either way, the main 3 points were the first 3 points. And I've gotten to a point where that's really all I need. I don't need the little tidbits anymore. Because the truth is, if I sit with my discomfort and if I don't ritualize, I know that I'm getting better. I'm making progress. All right, so I urge you to never ritualize, okay? If today's your day, make it. Make it today your day. If you watch this video, you're not going to ritualize anymore. It's over. The ritualizing is over. I know it gives you some relief, but it makes you worse at the end of the day. So, exposure response prevention plus mindfulness. Check out my other videos. I hope this has been helpful. Email me if you'd like, and have a great day.